Good afternoon and welcome. Joanne, Steve, how are you today?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with both of you.
I'm great as well.
Great. Well, let's just get right into it. Why is it important for corporations to take an active and visible role when it comes to equity and social justice issues? I'll start with you, Joanne.
Okay. Well, I think this is different than it's been in the past. I think that not only our employees, but also the people that our constituents that we serve are really at a point that they're demanding leadership from their CEO and from making sure that society is reflective of the kind of attitudes and decisions that they would like to see made in their own life. And I know for us here at AARP, it's important because we've been doing this work for over 60 years, really focused on social change and social justice. But this feels and looks different than it has before, because I think it's one of the few times that we've seen multiple generations, particularly that younger generation, engaged in how do we all show up differently and make things happen and lead in a way that we can be proud of. And so as a CEO, I know for myself in my conversations with my employees, and then also how I've shared through my monthly column and social media accounts with our nearly 38 million members, that they're listening and they're looking to see how we as individuals show up, not just for a bottom line, a financial bottom line, but that they want to work for and do business and be reflective in working with the kind of people that they want society to look at. And so it seems different and it feels different than some of the other kind of social justice activities that we've been involved in the past. And I think that we all need to recognize that and take notice of the fact that we have an opportunity to really make a significant change and move this country forward. And that people, not just here in the US, but people all over the world are looking to all of us to lead.
David, if I could build on that, I agree 100% with everything that Joanne just said. I think from a VF Corporation standpoint, and for those who don't maybe know VF, you definitely know our brands. VF is a portfolio of apparel and footwear brands like Vans, The North Face, Timberland, Dickies, Supreme, all brands that connect deeply with consumers. We certainly create products that our consumers purchase from us, but those products really enable experiences. And corporate America, today, we've all focused in the past on shareholders. We have multiple stakeholders today. And for a company like VF, we pay a lot of attention to our consumers. Consumers are in the front of every conversation we have, and our number one consumer is our employees. And consistent with what Joanne had to say, I mean, there's an expectation, and our employees and our consumers are paying very distinct attention to everything that we do, certainly tied to what we say, but this is a time where actions need to speak much more loudly than words. And our stakeholders are looking very directly at what we will do to drive change and to create a culture of belonging, not just inside our four walls, but how do we impact those communities that we live and work in, and really empowering our associates, our employees, to take a very proactive role in reaching into their communities and helping drive change. It's so important today, more so than ever, and it's a very important I think crossroads that we all find ourselves in.
Not all companies are taking an active and a visible role when it comes to these issues. What are the risks of not doing so?
Well, I think there's significant risk. I was just thinking as I was listening to Steve, we've been involved in social change work for many years. But this past year in 2020, we were in the middle of building out our next strategy for the next 10 years, sort of thinking ahead. and we intentionally, while we've worked in the social change space, we have intentionally added in equity and inclusion in everything that we're going to be advocating for across the country and on Washington, on Capitol Hill, and at the White House. We have intentionally baked in the inclusion aspect of, as we think about the work that we're going to do, how important that is, not only to have what we do for one, we do for all, but to intentionally be focused on those communities of color who may not have had the benefit of education, of being in the right neighborhoods, of having the right kind of financial support. How do we change our look and feel around the work that we do around health security? How do we make sure that we are as inclusive as possible in the solutions we bring to the table about financial security and what that looks like? And I think that it's what I've seen reflected from our employees is an engagement level that is far beyond what we have seen before. And we have a very engaged workforce. I often tell people that, we have about 2,500 staff people and about 1,800 of them are advocates who are used to going out and fighting for something to get some legislation changed or some local guidance. But this feels different because they're so engaged, because they can see themselves reflective in the kind of solutions that we're trying to put forward. And I think that the downside of that for companies who are not as engaged is that brand loyalty that they see from their, the reduction in that from their customers, and really the moral and commitment from their employees, I think is going to be reflective in a negative way for those companies who are not engaged. I'm proud to say that, we've had multiple conversations with our board of directors about what this is going to look like and the strategic direction that we're trying to take AARP in, and how important it is for us to have the board support in what I consider to be aggressive approaches that we want to see to make sure not only that we're protecting the 50 plus, but also that we are going deeper in making sure that it is reflective of those communities of color that may not have been included or put at front center in the past.
Yeah, Steve, what are some of the things that you all are doing, and what are the risks of not doing those things?
Yeah, I think, David, I think the risks, I'll go there first, is when we make statements about what we will do, and we're not able to, be able to really show and represent the actions tied with those words. There's an incredible risk of just eroding reputation and breaking trust with our employees, trust with our consumers. And if that were to come to pass, there will be a direct impact on our company's ability to deliver against our financial commitments to our shareholders. So the actions that we're taking, really, start from deep within inside. We've stood up a council to advance racial equity, and this is a cross-functional team, that represents our employees, from our distribution centers to our retail stores to our offices, and it really spans across each of our businesses. And that group has really helped us, come together and set a very clear set of actions. First, around how we think about education and advancement within our own organization, and looking at training opportunities, education opportunities for each one of us to understand, what it means to be an ally and a true advocate for all of our employees. How we think about mentorship, how we think about goals within each of our annual plans that tie us to delivering against our commitments. We're thinking about economic equity and looking at pay equity, but also, what can we do to really advance, our engagement, with diverse businesses across the globe. And the third one that's really central to many of our brands is how we think about environmental justice and social justice, and the actions that we can take as brands to be able to change the conversation and become more inclusive in how we engage with communities. A great example is our North Face business through their Explore Fund, standing up a council that's looking very specifically at changing the conversation, for people of color within the outdoors, and inviting people of color, to really take a step outside of the cities and understand, the power of outdoor engagement, what they can mean for you personally, but also how you can, connect with people and really draw a significant amount of energy, and very, very specific actions, dollars committed, and partnering with individuals that can help us change that conversation.
Yeah, Joanne started the conversation by saying that this time felt different. I know that certainly after the events of this past summer and some of the protests that went on out there, some of the dialogues that we've had within our respective companies, all to bring these issues to the forefront. How do we not lose the momentum that the attention that has been brought to bear on equity and social justice? How do we keep the momentum going? I mean, I know for us at AT&T, as I listened to you, there are all kinds of initiatives that we've taken to not just give money to certain groups, but to also really hold the mirror up to ourselves. And it starts with us as a company and what we're doing for our employees, and then taking that lens and looking and extending it to what we're doing in our respective communities. And so it is different. We do have different plans. We are doing some different things, but the question is, how do we use this moment in time to keep this momentum, and how do we hold ourselves accountable to what should be on the other side when this is all over?
So I'll start. I think one of the most powerful things that we did, and right after the death of George Floyd, I heard from a number of staff members that said, we just want to talk. And so I hosted an all staff, what we called Courageous Conversations. And I invited staff beforehand to just send us a short video telling us what you think. And I remember some of the staff saying, nobody's going to do that. That's going to make them too vulnerable. And so the first couple of days went by and nobody submitted video. And then the day before the event, we probably got 25, 30 videos from employees talking about their personal stories of things that had happened to them inside of AARP or in their community. And I shared with them a personal story on my part of being an African-American woman, raising an African-American son and daughter in the midst of COVID, right after the George Floyd death. And my daughter was going back to college, and my son had volunteered to drive her back to Philadelphia. And I remember going to sleep and couldn't sleep. And I woke up the next morning and I said to my husband, I don't feel comfortable with our son driving to Philadelphia in this city at this time. And we made the decision to put my daughter on the Amtrak to go back to Philadelphia than to have my Black male son in a car by himself going into the city of Philadelphia. I got more responses and comments from the staff, I think, on anything I've ever said to them in my 6 years as CEO, to say that was the first time that for many of my Caucasian colleagues, that it was real for them to say, even Joanne was having that kind of experience, and that, how personal that was, or for them to listen to another colleague say, hey, when we're downstairs in the cafeteria, and if there's 2 or 3 Black people sitting at a table, and then some of you guys walk by and say, oh, what's going on? That must be trouble. But just to hear that from their colleagues about what does that mean, that if you see a couple of African-American people gathered together, that there must be a plan going on. And those things seem simple when you sort of say them, but it's what many people, particularly African Americans, Hispanics, experience every day. And so, as part of our efforts to build on those courageous conversations, we've invited staff from all across the country to engage in those conversations. We've had those conversations at the board, talking about our personal experiences. And, obviously, we've had a diversity advisory council, but I took the position to elevate the chief diversity officer to the executive team to lead the conversation. Before I had personally taken it on as, no, I'm the chief diversity officer, because I've coming up over the last 30 years, I've always been the only Black in the room, the only woman in the room, and I always felt like it was my personal responsibility to do that. But I think it's so big now that it deserves a dedicated person that's their full-time job. So we've set that up. We've also started, the executive team and our board have gone through unconscious bias training that we're getting ready to roll out to the rest of the staff to be able to do that. But I also think we've built out a framework, our diversity, equity, and inclusion framework that is around the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace. So we're looking at our environment of where our employees are working. We're looking at the diversity of our staff at all levels, and we're looking for our suppliers and folks that we contract with to make sure that they understand the values that we have inside of AARP and that we expect that from them as well. And so we've been in this space for a long time, but I would say in the last 12 months, we have been very aggressive in trying to think through what does real societal change look like and what role we in AARP can lead, and what roles shall we be the followers and team members of some other efforts that are going on. But I think more than anything, sharing those personal stories had the biggest impact on the staff of saying, this isn't just something you're reading in a history book. This is still going on today. And that every day we get up and we think about these issues, whether it's my son being safe driving in a car by himself, or, the kind of discrimination that might come in the workplace, or just who we decide to do business with, to show that we are serious when we talk about societal change. And I don't know whether you've had that same experience with your kids. I don't know if you have kids going through.
No, that's exactly right. I've got two sons, ages 27 and 26, and we've had to have those conversations, quite frankly, Joanne, every time there's been a shooting. I sit them down and we talk through what that means. And it is a conversation that I have to have with my sons that my peers don't have to have with their sons. And it is something that until we get to the point where we don't have to have those conversations, Joanne, and that our conversations can be the same conversations across the board, I think we've got work to do. But one thing I can tell you, when you look at the makeup of the people who are out there in the streets marching and protesting, those are not just Black people there.
Right.
And so the narrative and the discussions are broader because those folks are in the car with my son, their friends. And so those discussions are broadening in terms of, think about what this means for your friend, your colleague, your associate. What does it mean for them? And I think that it sheds an incredibly visible light on all of this. Now, as I think, and Steve, look, I want you to weigh in here as well. Please do.
I think where you both are going, if I could just comment real quickly, I think there was a moment of awareness building for us this past summer, to where you're both going. I mean, many of us don't really understand what it means, what it feels like to fear about our children going out into what we would consider, their everyday life. And I think that was an unlock for us as VF this last summer, as we pulled together listening sessions immediately after, the tragic murder of Mr. Floyd. Just how do we help our employees, just let go of this emotion, that was building, and share it in a very safe environment, no judgment. And for those of us who come from a life of more privilege, it was extremely uncomfortable. And our Black and brown associates reinforced that, it was important for us to feel uncomfortable. And they were not going to make it better for us. They wanted us to really come to where they are, understand it, and through that realization, take an even more proactive approach to our commitment of creating a culture of belonging, within VF. I mean, we've made our commitments, as many organizations have, to change the ratio of our employees. We've made commitments to be at 50%, women by 2030 across all of our leadership ranks, and to move our BIPOC ratios to 25% by that same period of time. And those are all really good, but it's more than that. It's this culture of belonging. It's the ability to really attract and retain a truly diverse, group of employees to drive our organization, our brand, and our VF enterprise forward through a deep understanding of each of these different constituencies, and how important it is to allow them to be themselves, and to feel comfortable bringing their best self to work every day. And as we accomplish that, we assemble a leadership team, we assemble an employee base that now reflects the diversity of our consumers. And that just makes us a much more powerful and engaging organization that can deliver against the promises that we've made to our consumers, but to really serve their needs. And that will have a direct impact on our ability to deliver our commitments to our shareholders. But I think to your earlier question, on what are we doing, and how do we make sure this moment, really is captured and we don't lose it. For us, we've embedded this deep into our strategy. We committed a number of years ago to put purpose on par with performance, and we call this the power of and. That when we think about a business decision and the performance metrics that we would typically have, we put purpose on par. And are we delivering against our commitment to power movements of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and the planet? And you can't, we really challenge ourselves to not go one way or the other. How do we really service both? Because when we do, we're now delivering against those commitments and those expectations of our employees and our consumers. And we're able to drive our business forward. And in there are commitments, commitments that we've made to partner, with new organizations. We've partnered with an organization called Pencil. This is a very innovative, organization that is helping us think about how do we really change, the structure of the diversity within our product design teams, and putting together very specific actions on education, and helping people come in and get internships that can turn into jobs, and over time change the shape and the structure of our product design teams through very proactive engagement with external partners. And by making those commitments, we're now telling our employees that this is important, and they will hold us accountable. And being transparent on how we're performing, and being honest where we haven't hit the mark, why we haven't hit the mark, and what we're going to do differently. And I think transparency here from an organization standpoint is extremely critical, and really building and maintaining that trust that each one of us is trying to do within our organizations today.
One thing that concerns me is we talked about how right after George Floyd and the summer events, we made it personal within our respective organizations. And that brought a lot of what I want to call self-discovery for not just people of color, but for the majority community as well. And it caused companies and leaders to actively engage in what should I be doing? What should we be doing even differently than what we've done in the past? You've talked about some of those things, but the more visible companies are becoming, the more it looks like that's moving into the realm of the political. And given the divisive nature of this country right now, how should companies be thinking about navigating those waters?
So at AARP, we are first and foremost a social change organization. And I often say to the staff, we're a social change organization with a membership, not a membership organization that occasionally does social change. And that's a huge distinction, I think, in making sure that everything we do is nonpartisan and not political. But as you said, some of these conversations or decisions may come across looking left-leaning or right-leaning. And I think that for me, at the core, it's about making sure that we're focused on our strategy, making sure that we're focused on our mission, that it's about bringing social change, and that we should not be afraid to lean one way or the other if it's about driving the outcome that we want to see. And in this case, it's around addressing health disparities and making sure that people of color, as well as the broader 50+ community, have the amount of financial resources they need to live longer lives. And so, we often think, being here in Washington, D.C., that everything somehow turns political to be able to do that. But I think the most important thing for us is having our board support to say, hey, some of this is not going to be easy. In fact, most of it is not going to be easy. It's going to put us in awkward situations. But if we stay true to the core of what it is we said that we're out there trying to accomplish, then we shouldn't care who are the people at the table that we're having to work with to do it, to get something done, whether it's Democrats or Republicans or the White House or the Congress or the Senate, to be able to do that. That we should be focused on who are the right partners that we need to be engaging with to bring about the change that we want to see in society. But it's by no means an easy kind of conversation to have, or an easy kind of question to ask when people like you ask the question, or if you're having that, media kind of conversation. But I think it's the right thing to do. And I think as long as we're doing what's right, then we can, get past that.
Yeah, I would completely concur. I think the actions that we're taking, the commitments that we're making, need to be embedded in our corporate and brand strategies. If in fact, if we're driving against, those strategies that we've put forward that enable us to deliver against our commitments to our stakeholders and shareholders, those are the guardrails. These are the things that we've stated are important to our consumers, that will drive, the level of performance that we expect of ourselves. We may get drug into political conversations. And I think in today's day and age, it has become so galvanizing that, that's the risk that we all run. But if we can anchor it in our strategy, in those commitments we've made against our to be a purpose-led organization that has a performance-driven mindset, and that's how we create value, and that we drive this behind, the concept of a culture of belonging, and creating an environment where we can attract and retain the most diverse, and talented, group of individuals to drive our business forward. We will have a positive impact on those communities that we live and work in, and we will become a leader in helping change this conversation. And if people want to, capture that as a political statement, we'll have to let them do that. But this is something that really sits at the core of our VF culture and our commitment to ourselves and our people and the people that we intend to employ in the years to come. That this is a company that you can come and be yourself. Yes, you have to operate in a very respectful, a high integrity way and live within the cultural framework that we put forward for each one of us to succeed. But I think that if you stay true to your strategy, true to your commitments, you'll be able to navigate those political, potholes, because they will arrive. We know that. We see it every day in our day-to-day life.
Also think it's, if I could just add on to that, I also think it's important that with respect to our boards and the ESG committees, that there is much more conversation about how social justice and equity fits into the oversight of boards, particularly within the environmental, society, and governmental committees that usually sits within each of our boards. And so I think that's an important step forward that may not have been there in the past. Perhaps it had been more focused on governance and environmental, but not on that social, societal aspect of it. And I think that's a good thing to have conversations, not only with your leadership team, but also with the boards whose responsibility is to oversee our organizations or in our corporations to be able to do that.
So true, so true. None of this is easy. So I just have to ask you, what do you think the most significant challenge that you face when it comes to advancing equity and social justice? Joanne, you talked about, obviously, you've got a great relationship with your board. Your board's been very supportive. So it's not necessarily at the board, but where is the most significant challenges? Where's that coming from?
Well, I think for me, it's about how do we keep the momentum going and building, and that we don't see this as just some little program that, yes, we've assigned some staff to do that, and they're going to come back and report to us quarterly or however often we have to do it, but that it is a true part of who we are, and that it's built in to our strategy, and that people are incentivized for how these outcomes come about. I always say to people, we need to focus on the 3 Ps, that each of us has to take a personal responsibility for ourselves, and to make sure that we're doing and having the kind of conversations that we need to have around these issues, that there is a public sector responsibility, that we need to make sure that we're having conversations with our business partners and our governmental entities, because in some case there's going to need to be new guidance, new legislation that needs to take place to hold people accountable, and that we need to be engaged with the private sector, that, much like Steve said, that the private sector has to be engaged, that this can't be just something that you say, oh my God, that was awful that George Floyd died, or that Breonna Taylor was shot, but that you understand that this is not a problem that is going away until we all take part in trying to find a solution for it, and that we make personal changes, governmental changes, and we make changes in the private sector for how we invest our dollars, how we're engaged, how we treat our employees, and how we respond to these things, and not be afraid of the political consequences if we're trying to make society better. And I think that's easily said, but it's a difficult thing to do, and particularly to keep it up day after day. That's front and center in the decisions that we make for our companies, and also for our employees, as well as how we show up in the broader community.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, but I also think that as we think about some of these issues, and some of the events that keep happening, it's just so disturbing. And so many people, Joanne, say to me, David, it seems like we're going back in time and that we're not making progress. And I push back and I say, no, I think getting back to what you said earlier about how this is a different time,
Mm-hmm.
I am really probably more hopeful now, because all of the issues, I'm the product, I'm the tail end of the civil rights movement. And we were so hopeful coming out of that period of time. And then, we kind of hunkered down and we went on our separate ways, doing our separate things. And then all of a sudden this got exposed as if, for those of us in the Black community, this is something that had been an ongoing thing and it had never sort of left us. But now there are so many allies out there because they see that it hasn't changed. And I, for one, am very hopeful about the focus, the attention, the programs, the efforts, the energy around righting wrongs. And, Joanne, you said it earlier when you said, we have to focus on doing what is right. And I think that, in my world as a chief compliance officer for AT&T, I think that's, if you keep your North Star, it helps you get to where you need to go. Keep that North Star, out there and focused on it. That's what really helps you. And so I'm hopeful. That's how I am. My question I throw to the two of you is, are you hopeful?
Yeah, David, I'm absolutely hopeful. Clearly, structural racism is daunting, and we see it in spades this year in such a powerful way. But I think this point of a North Star, we as organizations need to be very clear around what our position is on this, what our commitments are to our people and to our consumers, and stay focused on really driving against those. And that means you need to be clear on what you will do, and be clear on those things that that don't really come into that conversation, and just stay focused on driving the change that you've committed to make, that that your organization is able to accomplish. I do believe, though, we're going to continue to, week after week, have compounding situations that will come at our organization that we're going to have to deal with. And I think we've learned to allow our people to come together, acknowledge it. Let's look at it. Let's address it. Let's be able to put it in proper context. And let's share in these issues as an organization, and together agree on those actions that we can do, that we are doing, and drive our strategy, to be able to be that agent of change in those areas that we know our organization is able to do, those areas that are tied to our strategy and that allow us to deliver against our commitments to our shareholders and our stakeholders. Go ahead, Joanne.
I am very hopeful because I see the response showing up very different with people of all ages out there in the streets are calling attention to it. When you look at the sports and entertainment, it's not just African-American sports figures. You see there's colleagues standing up with them about bringing about social change and justice. We often talk about 4 to 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. You see in people of all ages with the, I'm so hopeful with the younger generation who has been engaged in this, that this is not just a Black problem. This is not just a brown problem. This is a global problem that's not just here in the U.S. As you've seen the kind of support, in the UK, in Australia, in, all over continents around the world, calling attention to equality and equity. And so I'm very hopeful. I'm not unrealistic. I understand that there is going to be difficult days ahead, and that we all have to stay focused on the North Star. And I think that for me, decisions come easier when you're focused on the North Star. That, it's easy to retract and to go back into the norm if you're focused on that individual incident. But if you're always focused on that North Star, or I always say, focused on the mission of what it is we come to work every day, then those decisions come easier because you can see the long range versus losing a particular battle in the fight for social change and social justice.
Joanne, Steve, thank you so much. We've had a great conversation today. And at this point in time, I'll turn it back over to our Ethisphere colleagues in the studio.